and welcome to another episode of On the Grid Podcast, episode 27. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening from. I'm your host, Adrian. Once again, joining me on this episode of On the Grid is my fantastic right-hand man, Ethan Evans. Ethan, I can finally say it's race week.
Feels good to say that, doesn't it? Feels good. I think everybody kind of needed a bit of a reset. You know, it kind of got a little bit boring before the summer break with the same people winning every time. But, you know, we've had a month, reset and ready to see them win another 10 races.
Yeah, I think it's good that I'm back in the hosting chair, so I can keep a level head. But I think the same person will end up winning the next remaining 10 races. So there you go. But I think what better way to start off our preview show of Zandvoort, which is this weekend's race, is talking a little bit about Max Verstappen potentially getting race win number 9 in a row. That is 9 consecutive wins, only done one time before, which was Sebastian Vettel during his Red Bull days, of course. He also got 9 wins in a row. Ethan, obviously it's not been done in over, well, we're talking 10 years or so now, since Vettel did it. It shows that winning streaks like these don't come very often. But what do you think the importance would be if Max was to get win number 9 in a row? What do you think the importance would be to Red Bull and even Formula One record books? Because it's quite a big landmark. It's obviously happened. What potentially going to happen twice in the last 10 years. So it's clearly shows some importance that these landmarks do not happen very often.
Well, I'd like to say it's going to be this massive thing. It's a big thing for Red Bull, for Verstappen. But honestly, I don't think Verstappen sees it as that. I think he just sees it as another race. I think that kind of typifies this current season of Formula One in the fact that you've got the man on top who is leagues and leagues above anybody else. You know, you've got the machine and the man working in perfect harmony. It's a dominant car. It's a dominant driver. And yet it feels so empty because the driver couldn't care less about all of these records. And I think that really is the problem. Whereas before you had, you know, Sebastian Vettel bowing down to the car when he broke the record. I think it was in India in 2013. You know, that's a significant image, and it you know, and is very significant moment in Formula One when, you know, Hamilton and Schumacher have been breaking all of these records before. They have lived and breathed Formula One. It just feels very empty, I think, and it kind of just feels like another race. It doesn't feel, you don't go into this weekend thinking Max Verstappen's could equal Vettel's record here, the most consecutive wins. You just kind of think it's a given. So yeah, a little bit of a mixed bag. Of course, it's a significant moment for Red Bull. I'm sure Christian Horner's thinking, you know, and reminiscent about the time that Vettel broke the record 10 years ago and how their current star driver it could do the same here. But from the driver point of view, it just feels very empty compared to how Vettel saw it 10 years ago.
On the back of that, obviously this weekend is Max Verstappen's home race. Do you think will that play a little bit of a significant part in Verstappen crossing the line in first place and in making that moment a little bit sweeter for him?
Possibly. I suppose it is kind of written in the stars, isn't it? That, you know, he could equal the record at his home Grand Prix. So you could see it like that point of view. But I'm sure if you ask Verstappen, he probably cares more about winning his home Grand Prix than he does about equaling the most wins in a row. So maybe it all comes together for him, but, you know, who knows? Who knows? Maybe it's just another.
Well, from Max Verstappen potentially equaling the most consecutive wins in Formula One, let's talk a little bit about what we did during the summer break. Ethan, what did you get up to during the summer break? Obviously, a month-long hiatus from Formula One. Was it just plain and simple just boredom, just waiting until racing gets underway again?
Well, I think I said at the start, it was kind of nice to have a bit of a break from it. So, Red Bull have won all 12 races so far. Verstappen's won 10 of them and finished second in the other two. So it was nice to not go into a race week thinking, oh, could this be the one? And then to be disappointed as a fan of Formula One and a fan of, Lewis Hamilton, to see another disappointing weekend and see another Red Bull win and see all of this go through. I'm sure it was the same for you. But, we've had a significant period of time. I'm filled on false hope and false dreams that, we could see a Mercedes win or, at this point, anybody else win except for Red Bull. So we'll have to wait and see. They can't win every race, surely. We say it every week. But yeah, we'll wait and see. Maybe a few of the drivers feeling a little bit rusty after having a month off.
Is the Mercedes propaganda in full flow, therefore?
Always. It is. And I'm sure on your side, you're getting out the red scarves and the red that red T-shirt you've got from Ferrari. And we'll be wearing it on race day.
That is true. But then again, I'm a very pessimistic Ferrari fan these days. After what I've seen in the first half of the season, I feel quite... Whenever I said at the start of the episode that it's race week again, I did feel a little bit of a damper, thinking that Max Verstappen could potentially clinch yet another victory and a 9 consecutive victory in a row. So it doesn't fill me with a lot of hope ahead of the second half of the season. But, I mean... It's always going to be a bit boring during the summer break. There's no racing action. The only racing action I really did was go on for F1 23. That's about it. What else can you do? Replicate some of the races and potentially win it as your favourite team and not Max Verstappen. But that's about it. That's all we did during the summer break, guys. We essentially just waited for race weekend and just reset. But talking about Red Bull and their sister team, AlphaTauri especially as well, Nick De Vries, the man got sacked, and the man is looking for a way back into Formula One once again, and it could happen as a reserve driver for AlphaTauri and Red Bull in Liam Lawson's absence. I believe it's for the Japanese Grand Prix. I think it's around that time, or it might be Monza. One of the races. After Zandvoort, I believe Liam Lawson's busy doing supercars and they can't make the race weekend. So Red Bull Group are planning to get Nick De Vries as a reserve driver. Ethan, thoughts and feelings on Nick potentially being back in Formula One for a tiny stint? It'll only be for FP1, but still, shouldn't the man be as far away from F1 as possible if he's been sacked?
Well, it would be a little bit of a slap in the face to, especially if he goes back into, if he replaces Ricciardo for that, I'm guessing for the FP1 session, to be back in his car, a number of races after being sacked. If I was him, I would say, no, go and find someone else to do it, but in a little bit of a harsher words. But I suppose the thought is there still that they're looking out for someone who was employed for them, giving them another chance to show their skills and, but I think there's more to motorsport than Formula One. And, we've seen that from Nick De Vries before. He's gone into Formula E, done tremendously well. So, there's no reason why he can't carve out a career for himself in motorsport. I'm sure he'll still be a sought after driver. Given everything that's on his racing CV. But yeah, if I was him, I'd be saying absolutely not and go nowhere near that team. But it is a little bit of a surprise to hear that.
Yeah, I was very surprised to see it actually mentioned and popped up in one of the tweets. And you're thinking, it's a little bit of a slap in the face. You've just been sacked by the team and they're wanting you back as a reserve driver. Why did they not keep you as a reserve driver in the first place and employed you as a driver for the team on a full-time basis, but then dropped you again mid-season? It's a bit of a kerfuffle at AlphaTauri, but then again, they're likely to be their own team in the near future as Red Bull are planning to drop all funding. So then again, they're probably planning just for the future and just seeing their options out. But from one driver that's obviously been sacked, we go to a couple that could potentially are facing the end of their contracts very, very soon with obviously Lewis Hamilton, Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, both Haas drivers in Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg, Guan Yu Zhou and Logan Sargent. We obviously did our 2024 grid predictions before the episode before this one, but I want to hear your thoughts, Ethan, especially about Lewis Hamilton. There's still been no agreement on his contract. There's still not been a concrete agreement on terms for next year. Are you a little bit worried heading into the second half of the season and with nothing been announced over the summer break that potentially it's nearing the end and whether Lewis Hamilton actually signs for 2024?
To be honest, no, I'm not. There's not a part of me that thinks Hamilton is not going to sign a contract or is not going to end up at Mercedes next year. I think it's all but secure, really, isn't it? That's what Toto Wolff has said. It's emotionally, it is signed. I know it's not physically signed, but the thing is, if he doesn't stay at Mercedes, where does he go? Where is he going to go? That is an improvement on what it currently is. If there's anybody, it's never going to be Red Bull, given all that history. Given where Mercedes are and their trajectory, I don't think there's a better team to challenge Red Bull than Mercedes. You look at Ferrari and Aston Martin and McLaren. There is uncertainty around those teams, and currently all three teams have drivers locked in. I know they would snap your hand off to sign Lewis Hamilton. However, there isn't an available seat. And if you put yourself in Lewis Hamilton's shoes, you've got to think, what is going to give me the best possible opportunity to win my 8th world title? Because that's the main aim for him. It's got to be Mercedes. They've got the infrastructure, they've got the personnel, they've got the team around them to win titles as they've done so successfully. To me, it's straightforward for him to stay at McLaren. Oh, sorry. For him to stay at Mercedes.
Yeah, I know what you meant. You're still looking at back of the McLaren days. I get you. There were good. There were some good days for Lewis Hamilton. But talking about the two less experienced drivers from all of these drivers on the out of contract list, should I say? Guan Yu Zhou, Logan Sargent. Do they both stay? I know Guan Yu Zhou is pretty much pen to paper. He's guaranteed on staying, but yet again, there's nothing concrete. Logan Sargent, that one is a more uncertain one. Ethan, Guan Yu Zhou surely stays after his performances in the first half of the season. Logan Sargent has a point to prove in the second half, however.
Yeah, I did hear one interesting theory, though, that, if Kevin Magnussen doesn't improve his performance, maybe Guan Yu Zhou goes into that seat. He's a proven Formula One driver. He's good enough to be in the sport, but he is still a young driver and has the room to grow. That could be an interesting one. However, to be honest, I don't see Guan Yu Zhou leaving Alfa Romeo. I think he's solidified himself in that team. Came under a lot of stick when he got announced. However, he's proven all of the doubters wrong, and he's proven he is a very good driver and deserves to be in Formula One. And then with Logan Sargent, as you said, it's a little bit less secure. I said in my 2024 driver lineup, I don't think he'll be there. And unless he has a number of good performances, I don't think he will. I think it'll be something that's decided after Abu Dhabi or the week before Abu Dhabi, maybe the week before leading up to the race. But I think you could easily see him, Mercedes Junior, in that seat. Obviously, they've got strong ties with Mercedes. It's usually been seen as like a feeder seat, where you've seen George Russell come through. James Vowles is obviously the team principal, and he's worked there for a number of years. So you've got Mick Schumacher and then Frederick Vesti in F2 that could see that seat as an opportunity of a way into Formula One. But it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. But obviously, Logan Sargent is in the seat, so he's the favourite.
Just finally touching up on the two teams that potentially have two drivers heading out the door, AlphaTauri and Haas. Yuki Tsunoda, Daniel Ricciardo, and Nico Hulkenberg and Kevin Magnussen. Once again, I think out of the four of them, Kevin Magnussen is under most threat. I think Nico Hulkenberg showed his performances at Haas warrant another year. And then at AlphaTauri, Yuki Tsunoda will probably secure his seat. And Daniel Ricciardo, I reckon he's looking at a high possibility of either being in the AlphaTauri team for another year, potentially with a view to join Red Bull in 2025, or even jumping into the Red Bull team straight away. Ethan, do you think these lower teams, being AlphaTauri and Haas in this instant, need to secure their drivers as early as possible, just so it allows them to build on obviously not a very good season so far this season? It allows them to build onto next season and potentially bigger and better things.
Possibly. I think for Haas, securing Nico Hulkenberg for another year is going to be crucial, because you could see another team swoop in and want to sign him. We've talked about how good he's been and how if that Haas car was better, then his performances would be a lot more talked about. But in terms of AlphaTauri, I'm surprised they haven't signed, both of them signed for next season and then said there is a clause in that contract which states that if Red Bull decide to, they can promote that driver for the 2024 season should they see fit, should Sergio Perez not remain in that seat. So I'm a little bit surprised about that, but I would say there's a high probability that those four drivers at Haas and AlphaTauri remain there next season. I think it is possible that you could quite easily see those four there next season.
Moving on to more uncertainties, ahead of the Belgium Grand Prix, which was the last weekend of the season, of the first half of the season, we saw Alpine's team principal and sporting director, so team principal Otmar Safnauer and sporting director Alan Permane left the team before the weekend even got underway. But it's clear that Alpine haven't done the best they possibly could so far this season, and I think the team are looking for a bit of a fresh start heading into the second half of the season. Interim team principal Bruno Firmin was announced on the Sunday of the race. But I'd like to get your thoughts on this, Ethan. It's a bit of instability heading into the second half of the season for Alpine. And as a team, I don't think you're wanting that. You're wanting a bit of security for the full season. But what have you made of a kind of, let's call it a bit of a mishmash at Alpine? Because you could call it a disagreement. You could call it a bit of misfortune on Alpine's side has seen them not challenging the upper echelons of the midfield at times.
Yeah, obviously Alpine feel the direction the team is going in isn't to the standard that it should be, and that's why they've decided to get rid of Otmar Safnauer and a lot of that upper management structure. To be honest, I don't see Alpine in a position where they can fight those front five cars. Maybe the odd race. You've got two very good drivers who rightly haven't come under any pressure because they're doing the best job they can. They're comfortably sixth in the constructors. I think this is a time for Alpine in the second half of the season to solidify what they've got and look forward to next season and really focus on developing that car to a point where maybe they can challenge an Aston Martin or a McLaren. They were fourth last season, and now they've dropped down to sixth in the constructors, which is never good for a team to be doing, and that is why they've probably taken those steps to change that. But if I was in Alpine, I'd be looking at next season and thinking, let's focus here, because they've got that big gap to seventh, which I think is Williams actually on like 11 points, and they're on about 50. So they've got a big gap there. They're too big a gap to the teams in front of them who are quicker than them as well. So if I was Alpine, I'd be focused on next season.
Just finally, to round off this section ahead of our predictions for the Dutch Grand Prix this weekend, who do you think looks the strongest heading into the second half of the season? Obviously, Red Bull are likely to storm it. But behind them, what do you think the situation will happen between second, third, fourth, and fifth? Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, and Aston Martin, and then the rest of the teams behind them. So Alpine, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, Haas, and Williams. How do you think the championship will look come Abu Dhabi? Do you think Ferrari could claw back? Do you think Mercedes will pull a greater gap on McLaren, Aston Martin, and Ferrari? And do you think Alpine could potentially claw some gap between them and fifth, or do you think that those five basement teams are just likely to stay in the same positions? What are you thinking ahead of the second half of the season?
I think Mercedes will finish second. They've got about 50-odd points gap to Aston Martin and Ferrari. So I think the car is good enough to see them through. Even if one of them makes good improvements and closes that gap, I don't see them closing the gap enough to worry Mercedes. I would say Ferrari are the most likely to take third. They've got two very good drivers there, and they have a lot of the resources to challenge and to develop that car. Aston Martin is the one I'd be worried about. To be honest, I think that they've gone backwards this season. They were clearly the second quickest car at the start of the season, and they've got one driver driving to the best of their ability, and one driver who's been a bit of a liability. Obviously, he's had Lance Stroll has had those injuries at the start of the season, which has impacted him most definitely. But he was driving better at the start of the season than he is now. He was picking up more points. He was putting in better performances. Like in Bahrain, it was outstanding to finish, what was it, 6th or 7th with those two broken wrists, given the short recovery time. But he's over 100 points behind Fernando Alonso. If they don't finish second or third in the constructors, we know what the reason will be. Fernando Alonso is driving out of his skin. No, I'm not saying he has to beat Alonso, but he has to be at a respectable there's got to be a respectable margin, which is a bit embarrassing at the minute. But McLaren are the dark horse. You don't really know what you're going to get. If they can sustain the form that they showed just before the summer break, third is on the cards realistically for them. But it's just about whether those updates they can sustain them, and whether the other teams around them will find improvements and bring those upgrade packages later on, which McLaren had a head start on. But it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds. It really is a four-way fight for that second best team.
And what about in the lower dumps, as we like to call it, the basement teams that are not performing and not gonna fight for the top 5 places in the standings? Do you see Alpine holding that gap over Williams in 6th? I don't think they'll be challenged. It'll be very tasty to see what unfolds between Williams, Haas, AlphaTauri, and Alfa Romeo, but Alpine will definitely be unchallenged for 6th place.
You got to think so, don't you? You got to think that the points gap halfway through the season is going to be big enough to see them through. Like I said, Alpine comfortably have the 6th quickest car. They've got two very, very good drivers who consistently maximize their performance. And then Alpine, again, they're fighting basically on one side. Alex Albon is a fantastic driver. We went over that a couple of weeks ago when we went over our average ratings and how high Alex Albon is in that ranking. But Logan Sargeant hasn't got a point yet. So we kind of need to be realistic. If Williams can secure 7th, that will be fantastic for them. And I don't think they would have any complaints about that. But yeah, I think Williams are probably looking backwards and keeping that gap to their rivals rather than looking ahead to Alpine, who probably are too far away.
And finally, to round off the episode, let's look at our predictions for the Dutch Grand Prix, starting off with qualifying. I don't see any change happening here. Max Verstappen will get pole position. I've actually gone with a surprise entrance of Charles Leclerc in second. I know I said that I'm pessimistic at the start of the episode, um, but I certainly think after the podium in Belgium, I think Charles is showing a bit more fight, a bit more hunger, a bit more desire, to get even more podiums this season. I've gone with poor qualifier Sergio Perez in third. I think the second half of the season will kind of flip for him, and I think he will secure his seat for 2024 at Red Bull, with a decent second half of the season. I've gone with Lewis Hamilton in fourth, purely on the basis of Lewis Hamilton qualifies brilliantly, and I think he will continue his run in the top five. And then I've gone with Carlos Sainz in fifth. The man likes to qualify in fifth, and I think another fifth place qualifying will be in store in Zandvoort.
You know what? We've gone very similar actually. So I have also gone for Max Verstappen to get pole. I've gone for Charles Leclerc to qualify in second. I think he's a fantastic qualifier, and maybe the track will suit the Ferrari with a lot of high downforce and elevation changes. In third, I've gone for Lewis Hamilton, and I've gone for Perez in fourth, so I switched the two. And I've gone for Carlos Sainz in fifth. I think there's only about 2 races that he hasn't qualified in the top 5, which has gone really under the radar. And I think Sainz will be in the top 5 again.
And for the race, just finally, I've gone with another Max Verstappen victory. I see Sergio Perez moving up to second. I think the Red Bull car will once again guide Sergio Perez to a second place finish, which sees obviously Charles Leclerc dropping it down to third. Lewis Hamilton will sustain his place in the top 5 with a 4th place finish, and Lando Norris will overtake Carlos Sainz to finish 5th.
Again, we've gone very similar. So I've also gone for a Red Bull 1-2. There's no stopping Verstappen, and that Red Bull is good enough to see Sergio Perez through to second when he's starting close enough to those cars in front of him. Lewis Hamilton third, I've gone for. I think he'll claim that final podium space, and Charles Leclerc just to miss out. But in fifth, I've gone for Fernando Alonso. He is consistently maximising his performance. He got fifth last time out at Spa when that Aston Martin was awful all weekend, and he still finished fifth. So I think he'll pull it out the bag and claim another P5. But he will in turn lose his third place in the Drivers' Championship, and Hamilton will overtake him.
Yeah, that's the cherry on the top of the cake for you. I completely forgot about star predictions as I was going start to finish, but we'll go a little bit backwards. So we'll have star predictions right now. My 2 star predictions, incidentally, I've gone with a Valtteri Bottas DNF. Hear me out. I think it's the 3rd race that Valtteri Bottas will have that gearbox, and I see that gearbox going kaput. Don't know why. I've just got a gut feeling that Alfa Romeo's gearbox will just go bang, and he will not finish the race. And I see Alex Albon finishing inside the top 10. The man has been brilliant so far this season, and I see him picking up some more points at Zandvoort, and I think it'll obviously show him into a greater light in front of the whole F1 world watching.
Yep, so I've gone for Nico Hülkenberg to make it into Q3. He's a fantastic qualifier. He's shown that this season, and it looks like the Haas actually has pace in Q3 in qualifying, so I think he'll make it through. And then I've gone for a safety car or a virtual safety car to happen in the race. I think there'll be a little bit of drama. It's a very enclosed track. There's a lot of elevation changes, a lot of blind corners. So I think even if you see a car retire on track, then you could see a safety car easily be deployed.
That rounds off episode 27, series 3 of On the Grid podcast. Thank you, Ethan, for joining me once again on this episode as we preview this weekend's Dutch Grand Prix. We'll be back next week reviewing the Dutch Grand Prix and many more things upon that. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.